Hey everybody, this is Steve Miller, better known as Kelly's dad and marketing gunslinger. Thanks for joining us. I'm very excited about this program because most of the time, as those of you who have followed these programs, we've been doing these programs for over 10 years, a minimum of one a month, sometimes two a month. It's actually going to increase during IMTS Spark. You can watch for that when the calendars start to come out and the programming comes out. But I am so far out in left field this time. I have got Kate Strachnyi on here with me, and Kate is a certified, is it a geek or a nerd?
Let's go with nerd, and thank you for saying my name right.
I worked really hard on that when we first met. Kate is, all right, I'm gonna read what I wrote for the
you have something written? Is it a poem? Are we gonna start?
No, it's not. It's a poem, right? Yeah. Founder of Story by Data. Kate is the founder of Story by Data and the DATAcated Academy. Get that? That's a cute one. She is a massive rock star on LinkedIn. She is a certified rock star on LinkedIn. Last time I looked, she had over 130,000 followers on LinkedIn, and I have 8, and she specializes in working with companies on innovative artificial intelligence, machine learning, data scientists. She delivers training on data visualization, which is really what we're going to be talking about today. She was also, which I didn't catch this until recently, Kate, was that you were named LinkedIn's top voice in data science and analytics for the last 2 years, 2018 and 2019. And I'm sure she's going to go again for 2020.
I don't know.
She accidentally read my book. This is how we got connected. She accidentally read my book, and then she actually wrote about it and posted about it. And next thing I know, my LinkedIn account is blowing up with data scientists. Like, where do these guys come from, right? So Kate, welcome to the IMTS monthly webinar. And so
thank you.
Tell me about how does Kate Strachnyi become a data, you don't call yourself a data scientist, so data visualization specialist. What's that?
Yeah, data visualization specialist.
Okay, so tell us about how this happened.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for that great introduction. And I don't think I'll be up for the 2020 Top Voice Data Science and Analytics. I was really surprised to be renominated last year because they mostly choose new people. They choose 10 people every year out of I don't know how many, 300 or 500, I don't know, million.
130,000.
How many?
You're 130,000 followers.
No, I'm saying of all the people on LinkedIn, they choose 10 for each group. They have Top Voice for marketing, they have it for data science analytics and some other industries, but yeah, they choose 10 people each year to basically highlight. So that was an honor the first time, and an even bigger honor and surprise the second time around. But yeah, the way I got started with data visualization was actually also by accident, kind of like buying your book, Steve, right? Which really was an accident. So
it was, I know.
Yeah, for those listening, obviously Steve Miller, author of Uncopyable, right? I had a list of books that I was going to read in 2020. I basically had 20 books for 2020. And my books were starting to kind of get a little boring, and I would pick one up and open it up and start reading it and then start reading another one. So I'm like, okay, let me just go on Amazon and find something interesting. And I don't know what I even searched for, Steve, but your book came up, and I loved the title, and I loved the design of the cover, and you had great reviews. So I picked it up and I read it in 2 mornings because I tend to read in the morning when the sun comes up.
It's all one-syllable words anyway, so it makes it real easy.
Yes, absolutely. But I found myself just taking a lot of notes in my little phone app, where every few pages that I would read, I would get great ideas for my own business. How can I apply this for myself? And I was just, that's what really inspired me. And that's why I posted about your book. And yes, that's how you ended up going.
And here we are.
And here we are. Yes.
And here we are. So enough about my book. Let's talk about you.
Yes.
And we're talking about data visualization.
Yes.
All right. Now, what exactly is that?
So data visualization, actually, it might be good if I share slides now.
Okay, and before you do, I also want to remind everybody that we are recording this. So if you want to, if you need to jump off or you want to share this with somebody, this will be archived. All right. If you have any questions, stick them over there in the Q&A box. I'll be paying attention to this. Okay. Kate, you are not allowed to look at them.
Wait, I'm not allowed to look at what? The questions?
The questions or anything like that.
I didn't even know I could see questions. Now I'm definitely going to look at the questions.
Kind of a inside joke there. So anyway, okay. So you want to share? You're going to share?
I'm going to be on and off. I'll share on and off. So we'll go back and forth.
It's your program. So rock and roll.
Okay, cool. Yes. So maybe before I share, I'll just briefly tell the story of how I got into data visualization. I know I kind of sidetracked. I went into your book.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
But yeah, so data visualization wasn't what I started my career with. It actually all began in the risk management and regulatory compliance space, which is a lot more exciting than it sounds, I promise. But then I was basically on the road a lot and traveling to clients and working a lot of hours doing client work for a consulting company. And I wanted a career where I can stay home, because at that point I had my first child, then I had my second child, and data visualization and data analytics is basically what I ended up leaning towards, because it was a career that allowed me to stay home, work remotely, which I still enjoy today. So that was my little story.
Mm-hmm.
And now I will share my screen, because you asked me, what is data visualization? And
I love this title that we came up with, by the way.
Yes.
Data literacy and visualization best practices. Okay, anyway.
Sorry, do you want me to go back?
Well, that's right. It's telling easy to understand stories with data. Okay, this actually might help me. So.
Yes, hopefully. So we're going to keep things light. We're not going to get crazy technical. We're just going to talk about what is data visualization, how can you use it, what are some best practices that you can apply today, and also what should you be thinking about when you're looking at data visualizations on the news, in the newspaper, in magazines, on social media, and other places. So the way I typically describe an effective data visualization is something that is informative, appealing, and efficient, right? Because it's very simple these days to put together data visualization using Excel or Microsoft or Tableau or Power BI. You can get as technical or not technical as you want, but it is easy. You can even draw a bar chart or a pie chart if you wanted to and call that a data visualization. But the three things that I typically talk about, one is it has to be informative. So basically, your chart or graph has to inform your audience of your data message. Appealing, I do believe that a data visualization needs to look good enough and follow some basic data visualization best practices that can actually capture your audience's attention and engage them, so they look at your data visualization long enough to understand your data message. And then efficient is a very key part here, and essentially just means keeping things as simple as possible, but not simpler, right? I forget whose quote that is, but there's a famous quote about.
I think Einstein said that.
Was it Einstein? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Einstein said that.
Yeah. Okay. So listen to Einstein. Make things simple, because you don't want to keep people's eyeballs on the screen too long. You want them to look at it just enough to understand what they're looking at. So that's the little bit about what is data visualization. So now you can either continue on to
you go ahead.
process, or do you? I don't know if you want to take this in another direction, Steve.
No, you go right ahead. You're the boss.
By the way, orange juice. Another joke for you.
Okay.
Because it's orange, get it?
Sure. It's orange, folks. She's wearing orange.
Yes. So for those who are not familiar with data visualization, I'll briefly walk through, and maybe I'll move the little camera thing. I'll briefly walk through the data visualization process and tell you a little bit about how you would get started in case you wanted to visualize some data. So number one, I think always start with the context, right? Determine who the audience of your data visualization, who's the recipient, right, would be, and what are the questions that you would like to answer. So possible questions could be, number of COVID cases. It could be your amount of sales or how well your marketing tactics are doing. That's setting the context. And then who's going to actually look at your data visualization? Where is this piece going? Where is it going to sit? Where is this going to live? Next part is the data. So obtaining the data and identifying any necessary data fields. So in the case of trying to understand how your sales are doing, you obviously need sales data, right? What are the dollars that are coming in on a daily basis that you can visualize? Method. So this is a very, very important part. This is basically determining the most effective, the most efficient way to represent the information or that data that you've uncovered. And this is all about selecting the right chart, if you even need a chart. And this is, I'll get into that in the next slide in terms of how do we select the right chart and how do we know what's the right chart. I think that's one of the mistakes that a lot of people make when they're starting out with data visualization, because there's not a clear guidebook that comes along with every single piece of software, or if there is, we tend to ignore it because it's easier to just get in there and start building.
Do you think, let me just ask you a question about that. Do you think that there is a common approach to, so because if I think in terms of data visualization, like from my perspective, so like you say, you can look at it from, with sales numbers, and and by the way, you said to me, I made some comment about, isn't data just another word for numbers? And you said no.
Yes. So before the session, you said data is just numbers. And I said no, because data could actually be sensor data from your heating devices. It could be Yelp reviews could be data. So it's not always numbers.
Oh.
Right. And that was the point I was trying to make. And I think we're quickly moving towards a direction where we have natural language processing in place that can actually read text, quantify things, and design data visualizations that could tell you a story about, sometimes it's just words, it's just reviews, or it's just stars on Amazon. That's data as well. Yeah,
no, that's a good point about the Yelp reviews, and about, like you say, like Amazon reviews. I mean, while it's great, to read that somebody gives you a 5-star or something, but what did they say? Mm-hmm. Okay. And so would you say that like those, when I see something like a cloud of numbers, I mean, a cloud of words, right? What do they call that? A
word cloud. It's called a word cloud. Yes, it really is.
I am not a data guy. Because that's data, right? So a word cloud is a way of presenting data. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So do you think that there are, and you're probably going to get more into this, about like you see on TV, like right now, we got the election the campaign is going on right now, and we're gonna see on CNN and Fox and all these other MSNBC, and they're gonna have all kinds of data.
Yes. Right.
Do you think that it's getting easier to understand? Like for me, I don't think it's easier to understand data because there's more data.
I think it's not necessarily more data. I think people are getting creative in how they visualize data. And that goes back to my first part of making things simple, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we're at the point now, and this is not a new thing, but people can lie with data, right? There's a book called Charts Lie, or How to Lie with Statistics. And there's just so many ways to use different charts and graphs that can either inform your audience or mislead your audience, right? And in some cases, it could be even put out there as if this was unintentional. In some cases, it's clear that it was intentional. But yeah, there are definitely some visual best practices to follow when you're building data visualizations, but also you as an audience of a TV show, there are some questions you can ask, like what colors are they using to, show the good and the bad, right? In some cases, talking about elections, you might put the person that you don't want elected in red, all the data about that person in red. And it's like a subliminal messaging
because they're using psychology just in the color.
Yep, absolutely. There's color. There are other ways to lie with data. Like if you're looking at a bar chart, and this is a pretty interesting example. I don't have the visual here, but showing how, let's say, the education system has improved during, XYZ's presidency. And there's a bar chart that shows that it improved, let's say, 10%. But if you were to remove the axes, the y-axis, you can make that 10% look like a huge jump, or you can make it look like a tiny jump. So you can play with the way you represent your data to basically push your agenda, which is something I highly advise against. I think keep it simple, show what the data is showing, and let people decide on their own.
Okay. All right, I interrupted you, so go ahead.
No, it's fine. So, step 4 was to visualize. This is my favorite part. This is basically using visual best practices, such as, the proper use of a title, use of color, labels, formatting. There's so many things that we can get into, and I know we only have the hour, but I could spend days talking about just the formatting side of things. And then eventually we get into step 5, which is communicating. So communicating with your stakeholders and incorporating feedback, meaning if you've designed this data visualization, like a management report or something, you can submit that to your key stakeholders or the management team. And then the last kind of step I have in there is the fact that this is an iterative process. So once you communicate your data visualization, your stakeholders might have updates. They might want to see another filter, or, hey, can I also see this type of chart, or can I also see this kind of data or drill down? Then you go back to the visualize step, and then you go, communicate it again. And eventually, hopefully for your sake, that process ends and you hand over that the dashboard or data visualization. But sometimes it keeps on going depending on the project.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that you said you don't have a ton of slides, but would we be able to share these with the people?
Yeah, we can share these.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so this is a slide that people might be interested in. So this is the DATAcated chart selector guide. And just for those who don't know me, I use DATAcated quite a bit. So I'll explain what it means. It's basically me being dedicated to data. So, and it's a play on my name, also Kate, because it's it has that sound in there. So it's DATAcated. But basically, this is a chart selector guide that I put together for the DATAcated Academy, where I deliver courses on digital best practices. And it gives you a starting point of how do I know which chart to select, right? So in step 3 of the data visualization process, we mentioned the method of representing your data. And there are several examples here of charts that you can use. I think, yep, I even have your word cloud here, Steve, you see? Shows the relative frequency of words in your data.
It's a cloud of words.
It's a word cloud, yes. Yeah. See, I wasn't lying, that's what it's called. But basically, this helps you understand when to use which chart, right? Let's show an example. A single line chart, and I know this font might be a little bit small, but I'll read it to you. Basically says it displays trends over a period of time for a single category. It's pretty straightforward, but I think knowing these little best practices of when to use which chart is actually going to go a long way, because then you'll use the method that's most efficient, most effective at telling your data story. And then you'll use the method also that your audience is used to seeing. So this is why I typically advise against using charts or graphs that look really, really cool, right? I call them data art, or they're just fancy charts. Because if it's taking your audience longer to understand what it is they're looking at, or trying to make sense of what this warp of data is trying to tell them, then you haven't really done your job at keeping your data visualization efficient, right? Because it's got to be simple. People need to look at it right away and have an understanding of what they're looking at. What's the data message you're telling them?
Mm-hmm. Okay, now I can think of an example, obviously, for the single line. I mean, like stock prices, right? You're tracking you're following Apple stock. I don't know, Amazon or something like that, and you say, okay, over the last 3 months, here's what it's done, or over the last 3 years, or something like that. Very very simple going up that way. When can you give a couple of other examples of some of these other ones to just?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So for example, let's talk about a slope graph. This might be something that some are not familiar with. It's basically similar to a single line chart, but you're only looking at 2 data points. So let's say you're looking at stock prices and you're looking at the Apple stock prices over time. You'd use a single line chart for that. If you're wanting to just look at your month beginning and month end data, you would use a slope graph, which will quickly show you did it go up or down, right? It's kind of like trend lines. And if you were comparing, let's see, Apple and Amazon stock prices, you would use multiple lines and use a different color for each of those lines to show the basically relationship across multiple categories over time.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to give examples on all of these, but I know we're, again, limited on time here. So that's the chart selector guide.
What's a tree map? You got to tell me about that.
Yes, a tree map. It's basically trees on a map, Steve.
What?
No, I'm kidding. So a tree map, it shows the description here, it shows a hierarchical part to whole relationship. It's basically sort of like a pie chart, right? This is a pie chart. Most are familiar with a pie chart because we've eaten pie and we've eaten pizza that gets cut in slices. Yeah. A tree map is very much like a pie chart, except it's square. And it's also sliced into rectangles, just like the slices of a pie. And it also shows, like, let's say a tree map is 100%, has 100% of the canvas. Mm-hmm. The largest rectangle shows you the largest portion of that canvas, which means it's taken up the most real estate. It's also the most important part. So it's very much like a pie chart. It's used a lot when you have, let's say, more than 5 categories that you're trying to visualize. Let's say you have 100 categories, right? 100 slices in a pie, it's going to start looking crazy and confusing really fast. But for the tree map, it makes sense because especially if you have the 3 or 4 categories that really take up the majority, you'll see those words, and the rest would be like tiny little rectangles towards the bottom right, and that's basically how you would read it. You would ignore all the small, rectangles in that case, and then focus on the top left.
Cool. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
All right. So, should we move on to the checklist? Visual best practices checklist. All right. This is another piece that I share with the students at the DATAcated Academy, but I really want to share this. I wish the whole world would see it and use it, honestly, especially those who are putting charts out there in the public domain, because they're very, very simple, very straightforward items to think about. And I promise I'm not going to go through all of them because that'll just take us probably the rest of the time that we have. But there are some tips here that when you're designing your data visualizations, right, in general, you have to select the right chart. That's tip number 1. So if you've got, time period data, trends over time, select a line chart, check the box. Okay, we've done it. Objects working together to create, to clearly highlight a finding. So this just means when you're putting things, and by objects, I mean there could be charts, it could be titles, text, annotations, images, icons, a lot of things go on in a data visualization. You just have to make sure they're working together to share your key message. As for the layout, it basically means don't clutter up your view, right? It goes back to just do it the simple way. Use your real estate properly. So whatever you want to convey, like the key message, it has to take up the most space. If you are trying to talk about, like geographic data, make sure your map view is like the biggest view on the screen, and everything else is kind of supporting. Text. Basically making sure your text is legible, right? It's big enough for people who they can see it. The font type, believe it or not, plays a big role in this as well. There are some font types that are really good, some font types that are really bad. Like think Arial and Calibri is probably good font, but if you're looking at something with script or Comic Sans, those can get a little funky and hard for people to take seriously and to read.
I'm going to say something about Comic Sans. Don't use Comic Sans on anything.
So I actually used it once a few years ago, and I posted something online, and I got ripped up for it.
Oh, boy, yeah.
I thought it was cute. What's wrong with Comic Sans?
It's just wrong. It's just wrong. Everything about it is wrong.
What font do you use in your book?
I believe that is Arial.
Arial, okay.
Yeah.
So yes, use the simple fonts. And then, font type and size is consistent. So the title, typically make that bigger than the rest of your visualization. Format. So again, a lot of tips on format, but I'll give you a couple. One is the grid lines in charts, and I'll actually show you a visualization example in just a minute where you can see all of these tips come into play. But I always like to tell people about them first, so then they know what to look for. Borders, need to be removed. Values can be formatted so you can round things up. It's really the tiny small things that you can do that can take your data visualization from just looking good to looking really great. And these are small things that people don't necessarily even know what it is that you've changed, but they can tell the difference because it looks simpler. Staying away from 3D and bevel shapes like 3D pie charts, 3D bar charts, definitely stay away from that. Very, very easy to confuse your audience. And I know people think it looks cool. Steve, what happened? You like 3D charts or?
I've used 3D charts before.
Oh no. I'm gonna have to get you in my course, stats. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, all right. So somebody is giving me a little bit better of the a comment about Comic Sans. Let me just make as a place in certain graphic design, but was abused early in the days of the internet. Yeah, I agree with that. It was everywhere. During the time of the introduction of the Mac in 1984, everyone liked the font, and but it's suffered a bad rap since. Yes, I'm one of those bad rappers. And here's a question about, please elaborate on the benefits of low saturation color versus high saturation color.
Yeah, so we're actually getting to color right now.
Yep.
And I will cover that. Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, so color is probably one of the most important aspects of data visualization if used properly, right? I always tell people to start with the black and white data visualization and then use color intentionally to actually tell the story. And those who work in data visualization or have seen a lot of charts and graphs will tell you that a lot of times color is placed into the view for just to make it look pretty, to make it look engaging, or, people throw the colors of the rainbow on the chart. And it does catch attention, that's accurate, but I think it takes away from the data message, the data story. So in terms of color saturation, right, there are some ways you can use this. In some cases, if your data visualization is trying to show numbers that have gone, from small to large, you can use color saturation to show that, where the smaller values are lighter shade and the greater values are a darker shade. In other cases, you can use color for categorical data, right? Let's say you've got 3 categories you want to compare across an entire dashboard. Pick 3 colors, 1 for each category, and then use those colors consistently for those same variables. The other aspect on color, I'll say, is not to use more than 5 in the data visualization. And these are not hard and fast rules, right? This is not like do this or do nothing. These are just guidelines, right? And a lot of times rules are meant to be broken, but I think it gives you a good starting point where you're either assessing or building your own data visualizations. If you need to use 10 colors, you have to ask yourself, do these 10 colors actually add to the value of the data visualization? Do they actually add to helping my audience understand the message? More times, I would say it's probably a no, and you can get away with using less number of colors and still tell your story more effectively. And again, that will be in the next example. Last part, yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to make a comment about where you say patterns are still viewable when printed in black and white. And I'll tell you that I'm glad I saw that. I'm glad you have that there, because that's a common complaint of mine. Yeah. That I often, I'll print stuff out and think, okay, I don't need to print in color. I don't need to use all my color, cartridges up or something like that. And I'll print it out in black and white. And then some graph will come through and I can't read that graph. Right. Yes,
absolutely. When designing, so that was the last point I wanted to make, was the color blindness and the black and white. So when you're designing your data visualization, one of the, last things you can do is there's a couple of sites you can go on. You could just Google this, right? Color blindness, color image upload. If you Google those words, I'm sure you'll find a ton of websites where you can actually upload your final image of your dashboard or data visualization, and it will show you what it looks like when you print it black and white, or to somebody with different color blindness. So there are different ways that you can show the black and white. One of the ways is actually printing it, right, black and white. But if you don't want to waste your ink, you can actually just look at it online in black and white and make the assumption that there's a high chance it will be printed black and white. Especially now, people are not in the office where they have their fancy printers. People are at home. I think we are moving kind of away from printing things. I know personally I haven't printed things since probably June, when my daughters were still in school and I had to print their little worksheets. Steve prints a lot. I could tell by the face you're making. You print. You printed this morning, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
There you go. But yeah, it's still definitely something to consider.
So, okay, so back to the color blindness. You said that you can Google. What would you Google? Because one of the questions is what colors are best.
Yes, so you can Google color blindness, data visualization, image upload. If you Google those words, there's a site called colorbrewer2.com that actually gives color brewer, like brewing coffee, brewing tea.
Okay, colorbrewer.com.
They actually give you some tips, and they give you color schemes. You can even select if you want to show color blindness friendly color schemes, printer friendly color schemes. If you have like 5 categories, which colors would they suggest? And they actually give you the RGB or the hex codes for those colors that you can apply. Mm-hmm. Really useful stuff. Yeah.
And what color combos should you avoid? Red over blue, for example. Are there any rules about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say red to green. If you're trying to compare low and high, red and green is a don't do, which is something that I think would be new to those who are new to data visualization, because especially in North America culture, red is bad, green is good. Red means we lost money, green means we made money. And what happens is those with color blindness, and I think there's actually 1 in 12 men are colorblind. It's a much smaller percentage for women. They can't see the difference between red and green. So that becomes an issue. Yeah, I actually uploaded a red-green image once, and it looked the same. I'm like, oh my God, because for me, I don't have color blindness and I can clearly see the difference, but a suggestion for that would be blue and orange. So orange for the lower numbers, blue for the higher numbers if you're trying to show a comparison. Those two do very well together.
I don't do that. I don't use blue.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, at least you use orange. That's funny. So, okay, are we ready to go to an example?
You bet.
Okay, so don't get scared. For those who are watching, this is a terrible data visualization. And I show this on purpose, right? I want to show you what not to do. And then we're going to just talk about some of the things that are wrong here, and then I'll show you an after. So this is the before data visualization. If you're just joining now, please don't think this is something I created as something I think is good. It actually was really...
Do you have a template for this?
Right, no. It was very difficult for me to create because I had to break like all of my own rules for visualizing data.
Right.
But some of the things, and maybe Steve, what do you see is wrong here after actively listening to my speech? Name two things.
Well, too many colors.
Okay, that's one.
All right. And the numbers don't make any sense.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I just saw that. Yeah, they don't make any sense.
Yes.
So you got like 40. Yeah, they're different lengths, but they're not consistent with the numbers.
Yes. So yeah, good points here. A few things, and I'll just walk through the top as I see it. Right. The title, the actual title, price changes in consumer goods and services in the USA. By the way, this is real data that I pulled from some USA consumer goods website. The title itself needs to be bigger. The subtitle needs to be smaller than that. The name here and the word value don't actually add value to our data visualization. We can take those out. The font type and style and size is, all over the place. It's very hard to read. You were totally right about the colors. We've got a scroll bar on here, which I don't think there's any justification or reason for a scroll bar. We've only got like 13 or so categories. We can simply expand the chart. There's no need for people to scroll. You can avoid that. The prominent grid lines in the back definitely don't help us, and we don't even need them because grid lines are typically there for us to find the axes. And since we have the actual numbers already on each bar, we don't need the axes. Mm-hmm. So, I think that was it for the what's bad. I'm going to flip to the after chart and show you the same exact data, the same chart type, right? It's still a bar chart, but there are some best practices followed here, right? We've got the actual title. We have a subtitle that gives us a little bit more information, tells us it's from 1997 to 2017. We use color properly. So we have a little text bar that says consumer product and service categories that increase in price by over 50%. And I'll stop there, right? That color is orange. Why? Because, it's not good for prices to increase for us as consumers, right? And it's orange and it automatically links you to the bar chart where you see 3 orange bars. And those are the bars that have increased by over 50%.
Right.
Now, if we keep reading and decreased in price by over 50%, so we immediately can go to TVs and show that TVs have actually decreased in price by over 50%. What's interesting here is, aside from all the data visualization best practices, is the actual data. Look at what's happening in the USA. College tuition, education, and childcare costs way up. And then things like new cars, clothes, toys, TVs have definitely decreased. So I thought that was an interesting thing to uncover.
Yeah. Here's a question. How do you handle when colors differ between monitor and paper? Different users access the information from different sources.
Yeah, I think it's similar. It's a similar concept to the color blindness and the black and white. So I think if you can pull off having color distinction in black and white printing, you're probably going to be safe in terms of the distinction between on screen and on paper.
Oh, that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, that was my last slide, so I'm gonna.
Oh, that was your last slide.
That was my last slide. Yes.
All right. So, when you are working with people,
yes,
what would you say is the most common mistake that people make with this?
Gee, there are so many.
Okay, how many? All right, give me a few.
Yes, so I'll use an example for when people use business intelligence software, right? There's Tableau, there's Power BI, there's Click, and I'm sure you know all of these, Steve.
I use them all.
Yes, you use them all. You use them all today. They're basically all very similar, where they allow you to take data, click a button, drag it in, and then you're able to build charts in literally seconds, right? So you drag and drop the fields you want, you select the chart type, and boom, here's your chart and dashboard. Now, the biggest mistake I see people make is visualizing data just because they can visualize data. So a lot of times you see charts out there that you didn't even either need a chart for, you didn't really need to visualize this, but just because technology has made it so simple and easy for us to do it, people tend to visualize everything. And a lot of times they're not even sure, or it's clear that they're not exactly sure on what the data is telling them. They're just visualizing charts and maybe sharing it on social media, which could involve misleading other people. And I've seen this happen a lot with the COVID, with the pandemic, because there's so much data out there now, and people think this is a great opportunity for them to start practicing their data visualization skills. But you've got to think about, where is your chart going to end up, right? Somebody somewhere can be scrolling through this, click on your chart, and I think we're at the point now where we're not really distinguishing between actual news channels and those charts, and then whatever you see in your social media. A lot of times our minds accept both as fact, and we don't really question what we're looking at. We're just seeing, let's say, a huge trend up or a huge trend down. Either way, you could be right or wrong. Who knows who built that data visualization, right? It's just made it really simple for individuals all over the place to start visualizing data, which is good and bad. For the reasons described. Like, good because it allows us to be data literate, and it allows us to take data from even government websites and visualize it and pull insights. But it could be bad when we don't actually understand the underlying data as much.
So, one of our comments here is saying that a tip is to never use the default chart settings. Do you agree with that?
Yes, most of the time that's why I came up with that checklist, is because then you can go through, remove grid lines, remove borders, change the colors, and really make it your own. I think a lot of these BI or business intelligence tools make good enough charts, but you can definitely improve on them by, taking a few minutes and tweaking some of those default settings.
You talked about not using like 3D bar charts or something like that. What about animated charts?
So animated charts, they can actually be a lot of fun. There's for those who want to build their own animated charts, I highly recommend checking out a site called Flourish. They let you build your own animated charts really simply. You can also build those in Tableau, which is the software that I use regularly. But I definitely think there is a place for animated charts because it can tell you the whole story. As long as the animation is not going too quickly where people simply can't keep up, or again, using those best practices to make sure you're not misleading your audience by animated things, making things look better or making things look worse in your favor.
I saw a real interesting, and I don't know if it was the one that was it on car sales. Okay, It wasn't the one that you had shown a couple weeks ago, but I saw an interesting one that had annual car sales by manufacturer, right?
Okay.
Then it started like 20 years ago, and so as it was, as the sales changed every year, then the rankings changed, right? And it was really interesting to watch that. And I thought, man, that's got to be really, really hard to put together. But you say like Flourish. You can use something like Flourish, and then
Flourish.com lets you create this. I think it took me about 3-4 minutes to not only put together the visualization, but also make a little YouTube video about how to use it. So it was very, very easy. You simply just they have data in place. You just either copy paste your data in there or type your data in there, and then you can create animated bar charts. And there are other charts like scatter plots. They look cool. I think they're great for grabbing attention. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, one of the people in here says that you need to send your checklist to Microsoft.
Thank you. That's great.
Somebody else talks about a site called visualcapitalist.com. Are you familiar with that one?
No.
Oh, okay. Let's check that out.
Yeah.
Let's see. 3D charts, etc. Example of chart junk and ink to data ratio. not sure I understand that question. Do you?
So Edward Tufte has coined a term called ink to data ratio. It's basically the amount of things you have on your canvas, on your data visualization, that is maybe not your actual data, right? So things like your grid lines in the back of a chart, your borders, your axes lines, things that are not that they're there to support your data story, but they're not the actual data points. Like on a scatter plot, you'll see the actual points. So that's the data, and then the ink is the other stuff. So you have to basically minimize the amount of extra things you have in your data visualization. So it's all about decluttering, removing clutter, reducing cognitive load, which essentially just means, the amount of brain power it takes your audience to take your chart and understand it. And the easiest way to test this is create your chart and give it to somebody who's not an expert. Give it to Steve, right?
Give it to me.
And if Steve's sitting there for 10 minutes.
Small brain.
Right. Give it to your neighbor, give it to somebody who is not familiar with the work you're doing. If it's not clear to them, then maybe you need to either change the chart type, change your colors. A lot of times, there's a guy, Alberto Cairo, who he said this in one of my sessions that I really loved, is he said, make sure that your title of your chart can tell the story without the chart. So, for example, if your sales increased in the past 2 quarters, that's your title. Sales have increased in the past 2 quarters. And then your chart on the bottom can actually support that with the data points. That's another tip right there.
That's interesting. And I meant to do this, Alan, but thank you for reminding me. How do you spell flourish? You spelled it correctly. It is Flourish, correct?
Yes.
All right. So flourish.com, right?
Flourish.com.
Yeah, flourish.com. I was actually over there the other day and still had no
Where
idea.
are you? Creating animated charts?
Yeah, but I only had one data point, so it didn't matter. Anyway. I used the phrase data point. Okay.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah. Before we run out of time, and, absolutely keep popping the questions in. My rule of thumb, here's one. My rule of thumb is the chart is understandable from across the room. Yeah, I think that's I think that's good. I would also compare that to kind of like even in the marketing world, like, for example, trade show exhibits. For years, there are companies who have trade shows at exhibits. They just do their exhibits wrong. Exhibits are either too busy or they don't answer a simple question. And the simple questions at a trade show are, who are you, what do you do, and why should I stop? Those 3 questions, real simple. And if a person walking by can't answer those 3 questions, in 10 seconds, then your booth is confusing. And I use kind of the same type of approach by saying, I call it the grandmother test. I say, imagine that you take your grandmother and you put her in front of your booth. You put her and you give her 10 seconds, and then you say, okay, who are we, what do we do, and why should somebody stop? And if your grandmother can't answer that, then it's too complicated. Okay, so something along the lines of if the chart needs to be understandable, sort of from across the room, so to speak. Now, before we get into, let's see, flourish.studio.
Flourish Studio. All right, my bad.
Thank you. Yeah. Flourish.com seems to be something else, some kind of adult site.
No, come on, really?
No, I'm not kidding. I'm kidding. No, of course not. Flourish Studio. Yes, thank you. Flourish.studio. Tell me about, DATAcated Academy. Tell me about that.
Yes, absolutely. So DATAcated Academy was born out of my Story by Data company. So a couple years ago, I started Story by Data, which started out with just a blog site with some humans of data science interviews along the way. And I've always wanted to teach data visualization. It actually started when I started data visualization or trying to learn it. I actually put out YouTube videos on the Story by Data YouTube channel, simply to remember what I learned, right? Because once you teach it, that means you know it well enough if you can explain it to somebody else. Yeah. And a lot of times I would refer back to those videos because I would just need a quick refresh, and I made them simple enough that I would like to watch them. And people have. I've grown the audience, like you said, 130,000 people, most of whom are data enthusiasts or want to be data scientists, data analysts. And my goal here with the DATAcated Academy is to make data visualization simple. I want to teach these visual best practices, some of which we went over in your session today. There are plenty more that I cover in the course. And also teaching people to go from data to a dashboard using different data visualization software. So right now, in the next 10 days or so, we're in August 18th, right? So August 27th, I'm launching 2 new courses. One is called Data to Dashboard with Tableau Public, which is a free business intelligence software, and Data to Dashboard with Power BI. Eventually, and I'm not going to put a timeline on this, but I'd like to have over a dozen courses called Data to Dashboard with, and then taking some of these newer data visualization software that maybe, not as popular, not as well known. I've uncovered a couple for those out there, like Data Wrapper and Infogram, both free to use. Really cool software that you barely ever hear about, but just want to give them a quick shout out because some of their default settings, like Data Wrapper, for example, their default settings are amazing. You rarely have to make even a small tweak because they're following the best practices. They're going to put my course out of business because they're really doing a good job at that.
Now, do they find information is it storybydata.com or?
So it's DATAcatedacademy.com is where you find out more.
DATAcatedacademy.com, because I wanted to, I actually want to make sure I have share your contact information with everybody. I put this together.
Look at that. Thank you. You're so good at it.
Definitely, storybydata.com, LinkedIn, that's Kate's, LinkedIn account. You're going to want, if you like data, trust me, because I've been following her now for a couple months. Is that what it is?
Yeah,
we've been connected for a couple months now.
Yeah.
And I'm just blown away by the amount of information that is coming out of this little child on the other side. I'm still trying to figure out how she has kids, but, and Story by Data, but I should have had the other one up as well. In fact,
that's fine, Steve, because if people go to storybydata.com, one of the things they'll see is DATAcated Academy, and you can click on that because it kind of sits under Story by Data's umbrella.
Oh, okay. All right. So they can go find out more about it through that, as well as they can follow you online, which again, like if you're into data, I highly recommend that you do. And her connections, some of the people that follow that you're connected.
Are you thinking of Scott Taylor again?
Scott Taylor, Ravit, those guys, Scott Taylor, I would say you have to go watch some of Scott Taylor's videos.
Yes.
Even though they're data, the guy is hilarious. The guy is absolutely hilarious.
You got to talk about the puppets, Steve. So he uses puppets to help calm data down. He's the data whisperer.
It's like the Muppets. He's really, really amazing. So I want to see. I just want to give a second here for if there are more questions before we roll out of here. Do you have any last minute or end of program things?
End of program commentary
with people? I hope that some of these people will go check out your programs.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what I'll leave people with is simple is always better when designing data visualization. If you ignore everything else I've said, as long as you keep whatever you're working on as simple as possible and keep the truth of that data story message in mind, that would be the biggest last tip I leave you with.
Cool. And you know how to reach her. Get out there and follow her. I've learned more about data, following Kate and talking to her in the last couple of months than I've ever known. And and I have a small brain. So so Kate, thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, one last question before we get out of here, okay? And this is a tough question. How to measure visualization effectiveness?
That is a really good one. So if you're working at an organization, I think the best way to measure this is user adoption, right? A lot of times these BI software tools, let's say Tableau, for example, when you publish your dashboard onto the server for Tableau, which basically means you make this available to everyone in the organization to use and leverage for getting their insights from the data, you can actually track how many people use it, just like website analytics, right? How many hits do you get? How long do people stay on there? And you can use that and analyze that. If somebody only came there once and never came back, chances are it's not very useful, or there may be some confusion as to how to use it. That's more for dashboards posted on the server. In terms of visualizations that you simply put out there in a magazine, I think it goes back to the grandma approach, right? If if your grandma or your neighbor can't understand it right away, then you might have to go back and do some tweaking.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about SlideShare?
You mean LinkedIn SlideShare?
Yeah, I think that's what he means. Yeah.
I think they're
for
doing away with it. That's all I heard, is that they're doing away with LinkedIn SlideShare.
Oh, they are?
Yeah. Oh. I don't know if that was the question, though.
No, I just said, what do you think about SlideShare?
Oh.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's being sold, right? As I said before, this has been recorded. It will be archived, probably available in the next 24 to 48 hours at most. And we will also, on the replay page or the archive in the IMTS webinars, I will also put a link to download the audio, even though this is a very visual thing, but just in case you want audio. And I'll make sure Kate sends me the visuals that she had, and we will upload those for you to be able to download. Okay?
Absolutely. Happy to share.
Kate, thank you so much again. I know you and I will be talking again soon, or giving each other a hard time, but greatly appreciate you being my guest here today. This was a lot of fun. And just go check her out and hang, follow her. You'll love it. Okay. So this is Steve Miller, better known as Kelly's dad and marketing gunslinger, and orange is the color you want to be wearing, right? Thanks again for joining us this month. We'll be back again next time. We'll probably be back in Spark, and actually this is going to be replayed in Spark. So we'll be talking to Kate about maybe doing some Q&A in there as well. So again, thanks a lot very much. Always remember, be uncopyable. We'll see you next time.
Bye.